Hi Guitarlings, I'm Gray at Hub Guitar. Today we're going to learn the much covered Can't Help Falling in Love with You, originally performed by a certain Elvis Presley, and since has been covered by a lot of groups, including I think the 21 Pilots, so that's how maybe some younger people who aren't that familiar with Elvis have heard of this tune. So for those of you who don't really like to sing, I think this is a great way to play your favorite songs because this is a solo guitar arrangement. That means we've combined the melody and the chords into a part that can be played by a single guitar. But even if you do like to sing, you could use this arrangement as an interlude in your own performance to kind of mix it up a little bit. If you've ever seen someone sing and play guitar for a whole song, it can kind of feel a little bit boring towards the end. You know, they do the verse, they do the chorus, and then it's just kind of more of the same. It's hard for a single instrument to create new and interesting ideas over the course of a whole song. So this is one great way to add a little musical interlude to your performance if you do like to sing. You may or may not like to play this with a capo around the second or third fret. Today I'm just going to do it in open position with no capo. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you know the chords that the tune is based on. On the first measure we have a C major chord. This is probably the first chord you learned as a guitar player, or one of them. Now on the second measure it says E minor, but the shape that's spelled out by the tab is a little bit different. So remember, there are many ways to play an E minor chord. There are many ways to play every single chord. So that's an open 6th string, 2nd fret of the 4th string, open, open, and 3rd fret of the 1st string. Now you could think of this as a regular E minor shape where you just add a G onto the 3rd fret of the 1st string. And that's because the melody part calls for there to be a G in the melody. So we've got to change our chord. But because we also don't ask for any notes on the 5th string in the tab, there's no 5th string, so you don't actually have to press the 5th string. That's just a way to remember this chord shape. Then we've got A minor, and then we go on to F. It's going to be best if you can play this full F by barring your index finger across the first frets of strings 1 and 2. So if you're having trouble playing the full F chord, you can sort of play the notes one by one and move your left hand around a little bit rather than trying to press them all at once. Then we go back to a C chord, and then we go to a variation on the G chord. I use this chord a lot. It's the 3rd fret of the 6th string, open 4th string, open 3rd string, and 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And then in the next measure it's still G, but this time we lift up the note on the 2nd string to reveal a B from the open string underneath. Now in the next line we do have to use a different voicing for F. I think that this is kind of based on an F bar chord, but that's a little bit tricky for the level of difficulty that this song is aimed at. So you can just press the 3 notes of the chord with 3 different fingers without playing a bar chord. You can put your index finger on the 1st fret of the 6th string, your 3rd finger, your ring finger, on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, and then skip over the 4th string and put your 2nd finger, your middle finger, on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Back to a G shape. This one most closely resembles the G that you probably learned when you began studying guitar, 3, 2, 0, 0, 0, 3. Except that you don't need anything on the 1st string, so why bother pushing down that note? Now in measure 11 we have A minor. Notice that the bass note changes from A to C. And if you're having trouble doing that 4-finger chord, you could substitute an A minor 7th instead. That would just be 0, 2, 0, 1 instead of your A minor. And then instead of moving the bass over, you just basically turn it into a C chord. The next measure is probably the trickiest of all. This is a really cool chord, D minor over F. So we're going to put our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the 6th string, open 4th string, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and then pinky on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. But then you've got to play an open E string and turn it into a 1st fret note. There's a couple ways to do that. You could just start out like this with these 3 fingers, play through the open note, and then flatten down to kind of a bar chord. And even for a beginner, that should be pretty easy to grab because the only note you're really trying to grab with your bar is that 1st fret of the high E string. Or you can kind of mid-chord, you can lift up that index finger and move it and get it ready. Like that. We're going on to C. This is basically a C major, but we've got a G on top again, so it's 3, 2, open, 1, 3. And we don't really need to play the second string, so also, again, why push it if we don't need a note on that string? Back to G. This is a 3, 2, 0, 0, 3, and then another C. And that completes the verse. This is probably the most interesting part of the song. You may not even need to study the bridge part. This was a time when you could write songs that were kind of unconventional in structure, and I think this is a pretty unconventional structure. This song doesn't really feel like it has a chorus. It has a sort of a main part, a verse if you will, and then it goes to this bridge part, which is actually sort of anticlimactic in a way. And we're going to start with an E minor chord. Now some of you may know you can basically play an E minor chord with all open strings. 6, 3, 2, 1. That's because an E minor chord is just the notes E, G, B. Here's an E, here's a G, and here's a B, and here's an extra E just for good measure. So you can play that chord with all open strings. And then we're going to change the melody notes from B on the 7th fret of the high E string to G on the 3rd fret of the same string. So as you play that, try not to jump up and down, because you're probably not going to be able to accurately guess where those 2 frets are. Try to get your pinky playing the 7th fret, and then your first finger playing the 3rd fret, and try to get them to sort of remember that distance. That's going to be a little bit easier than trying to guess where each of those frets are. So use 2 different fingers for that. And then we go to a B7. That's going to have, you could put your 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the high E string, and then you could bar all the way across the 4th fret up to the 4th string with your index finger. So it's 4, 4, 4, 5. And then that just repeats a couple times. Notice this time I decide for some reason to use my pinky on the 5th fret. That's fine. And then we kind of exit out with this little transition to E minor. That's just similar to the E minor in the 2nd measure of the tune. And then we're going to go to A7. So if you're going to play that out, it would be open 5th, 2nd fret of the 4th string, open 3rd, 2nd fret of the 2nd string, and 3rd fret of the 1st string. Then we go to D minor. Basic D minor, you'll probably learn this in the beginning if you've studied your basic campfire chords. If not, it's a 1st finger on the 1st fret of the 1st string. And then you can use either your 3rd finger or your 4th finger, that's your ring finger or pinky, on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And then your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Make sure you include an open D there, that's the 4th string. And then the bass note changes from D to F on the 3rd fret of the D string. We go back to a little G chord. And depending on how you're playing this, you might like to go back to the top and do it maybe a little bit faster with some more variations. If you're familiar with and comfortable with these chords, you might find lots of little kind of ideas strike your fancy as you play it, so have fun and throw in everything but the kitchen sink. Just a quick word about how you're going to use your right hand to play through these notes. You want to pay attention and make sure that you're not just using your thumb all the time. And some students kind of do a lobster claw where when there's 2 notes they do thumb and index and the rest of the time it's all thumb. Ideally you need your thumb, index, middle, and ring fingers engaged as much as possible. So when notes happen in groups of 4 strings, you're generally going to have thumb on the lowest, index on the next lowest, middle on the next lowest, and then ring on the highest, whatever that combination of strings might be. For example, in the first measure we're using the middle 4 strings, so it's going to be thumb and ring finger, and then it's going to be index middle, thumb index middle. And then on the next measure where we have the E minor, this is measure 2, we're going to use a similar scheme, thumb and ring finger. Now we might use the thumb again, or we might use the index finger and the middle, so we could do thumb and ring, index middle, thumb, index middle, or we could let the thumb do double duty for another note if that note is also on a lower string. So we could do thumb and ring, thumb, index, thumb, thumb, index. That's okay. So you sometimes hear a guideline that the thumb is used to play notes on string 6, 5, and 4. I don't think that's always going to be the case. but it's more likely for sure. It's not likely to cross over to string 3. Remember that every note in this tune is going to be nice and even, so you can sort of tap your foot along while you play each note or set of notes. And as you get used to that, you'll be able to get the speed up a little bit, and it will sound much more smooth and fluent. The meter that we use here is called 6/8. So it's really 2 groups of 3 notes per measure, and so the feeling is like big, little, little, big, little, little. So you can kind of imagine that we've got 2 major pulses in each measure, and then some kind of sub pulses. So it's like da, 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 da. So that in translating that into your guitar playing, that means that the notes that happen on the strong pulse, which is on the 1st or 4th pulse in each measure, that's going to be a little bit stronger and a little bit louder. And the notes that happen on any other pulse are probably going to be a little bit softer and a little bit weaker. Playing that way is going to bring out the 6/8 time that this arrangement is written in. So that's it for Elvis Presley, Can't Help Falling in Love. Thanks for watching.